let's see, that was up here. I was doing my pediatric internship and residency in San Francisco, and the nurses said to me, we've seen 3 babies this week with gastroschisis, and they're from the Central Valley, failure of closure of the abdomen. Do you think it's something in the chemicals? We didn't know. We'd see 3 neural tube defects over the course of a week or so from the same locality. We didn't know. And we had no way of measuring what was actually in people. We had no way of record keeping what was being used. And after I did my CDC time, and Rahul, I was saying that I went to Bihar State and worked in India on smallpox eradication, among other things, I got to really learn what farm workers do. And the next time you have a strawberry, I convey several thoughts to you. One is they are the most pesticided food sold in America. I do buy organic strawberries. It really is very sensible because it's a lot of chemical when they use when they grow these very soft, easily spoiled foods. A lot of fungicide. By the way, the fungicides worry me more in terms of reproductive and carcinogenic effects than the organophosphates. But number 2, can you imagine having this job in the hot sun, 60 hours a week, paid by piecework, and then doing that for 40 years? You can imagine the back illnesses, the knee illnesses, and the other problems that people confront. So in many ways, environmental health is about human justice. And it's a wonderful gift as a career, and I've been so happy to be able to. Is this you? One says, that one's me. Because it's an outlet for both, frankly, social idealism as well as science. So it's a wonderful tension between the two. I wish I had some design skill. That's the only thing I really want. The book on the left is the one I teach in my at the School of Public Health, and it's really fun because I do it jointly with the Urban Planning and the Policy School. And I usually have about 40 students in the room, and about half are from public health and half are from mostly urban planning and some architecture, but a lot of from business, law, sustainability. And at the second class, I do speed dating. And so we have the 20 public health students line up against the 20 students who are from the other disciplines, and every 2 minutes they change places, and they have to crystallize what they're interested in and then do presentations. And the course starts out with a lot of content and vocabulary because the design people have to learn the vocabulary of public health because we've got so many acronyms and technicalese and what's the difference in morbidity and mortality. And then the public health people got to know what a TOD is, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of exchange of this, but towards the end, there's a lot of focus on how you create change. So one of the more difficult tasks I give them is do a radio perspective. In our radio station in San Francisco, somebody comes on for 117 seconds, has to tell a story, has to hold your attention, and you have to go away from this with an understanding about, something that's going on in the world. By the way, the students all think it's a completely easy task to do a 117-second radio spot, and it turns out they always say, boy, was that hard. Julie, you probably remember the perspectives on KQED. This is the companion book for the video series, and I'll talk more about it as we go forward. And this is the flyer for the PBS series. It's now been shown in about 2 million homes in the United States, but we'll probably get another 500,000 with the showing in New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. On the day that my first grandchild was born, October 11th, 2011, this ad appeared in the school university newspaper, the Daily Bruin, at UCLA. And clearly, General Motors had done some focus group testing, and they had talked to college students, and they said, what's your life? Oh, I got a lot of debt. How are things going with your family? Oh, they're really annoyed. They want me to get a job, and I'm having trouble finding a job. What are your prospects looking like? I'm really worried. And one after another. And so the people behind the one-way mirror are getting the meta message from the college students about what's going on. And the meta message is, life sucks. So a good marketing tool is, well, we'll just sell it to what resonates with people. And so General Motors said, well, we can help people deal with this. If you stop pedaling and start driving, pretty girls will no longer smirk at you because you're saving energy, not polluting, reducing congestion, and getting physical activity. And you should go out and buy a General Motors $30,000 GMC Sierra and pay for it for the next 7 years, and you will live happily ever after. So I showed this picture in class because I was very upset about it, and one of my female students said, Dr. J, you don't know anything. She's not smirking at him. She's flirting with him. She doesn't want to be with the flabby guy driving the car. So in a way, it's a metaphor for what I'm going to be talking about, and I'll go through a lot right now. GM is right. Things do suck. We've seen a fourfold increase in antidepressant consumption in the United States over the course of 20 years. And Rahul, in some ways, it's because we've lost places of the heart, places that give us comfort and help us recollect our mind, our bodies, and our souls. I know there's other things going on, but that's not too far off, because what makes human beings happy and helps us counter depression is being with people we love, in places we want to be, and food and music doesn't hurt either. So you had earlier discussions about what was the purpose of the hospital, and I will argue at the time of Chaucer it was the pilgrimage, and maybe 100 years ago it was about healing and recovery, and the nurses or the sisters, the nuns ran hospitals and did the same for care. When I was a resident, medical school and hospitals were about science. We had the Flexner report, we were going to be about science. And nowadays, the medical care system's about money. So my son is now an internist, but a few years ago we sent him to Costa Rica, and he was working in Costa Rica learning Spanish in essence, and he sent me an email and said, Dad, these people spend 7 times less per person on medical care than the people in the United States, and they live exactly as long as we do. And for a young person, wow, there's something wrong here about what we're doing. And when I was a medical student, we ran a program on the skyrocketing cost of medical care. It was 7% of all the money in the United States. You can see what it is now. It's close to 19%. We're not living very well. And every time I go to a meeting, so at UCLA, there's a big sign out in front of the Ronald Reagan Hospital. We're the best in the West. We have done 1,200 heart transplants. Think about the cost of that. And yet, as my son said, I can write one line on a discharge certificate, spend $10,000, but I can't get somebody a room to stay in at night. And so this disparity between what we spend on medicine and what we actually accomplish is very small. We've added 30 years to the life expectancy of Americans. How much is medical care? 5. All the rest has come from what Rahul does, and from the people in design and architecture and sanitary engineering and people that build things. It's the physical changes in the environment. Housing, it's healthy food, healthy workplaces, and immunization. And I actually view immunization as a kind of infrastructure, not a kind of medical care. Now, this man is one of my heroes from the 19th century, and he should be your hero too, because he created places of the heart. Yes, he created them for people in 1880 and 1890, Frederick Law Olmsted, but he created places of the heart for the great-great-great-grandchildren of Boston and the rest of the United States and other places in America. My favorite place in the world is Yosemite, and he's the founder of Yosemite State Park in 1866, 50 years before Roosevelt got there and made it a national park. So I spent 10 years at CDC, and I did lots of battles. We had cruise ships and chemical weapons and childhood lead poisoning and asthma and chemical body burdens and on and on and on. And I worried about things very, very small. And one day the head of CDC invited us all into his office. He's writing an article on the big threats of the 21st century. And I'm thinking about endocrine disruptors and obesity and on and on and on. And I'm thinking about climate change and the disappearance of the ice packs. And I'm driving to the office for this huge meeting on the future threats. And I'm going down Buford Highway, 7 lanes wide, 1.5 miles between crosswalks. Highest pedestrian death rate in the state, it's 95 degrees. And I'm thinking big, important thoughts, and I see this elderly woman, and she's struggling, and she's walking along carrying a shopping bag, one in each hand, and it's really hot. And she's bent over and has red hair like my mother, and I want to give her a ride, and I don't do it. I go to my meeting. And I'm thinking, if she collapses and dies, the cause of death will be heat stroke. and it won't be absence of trees, blacktop roads, poor air quality. And if she is killed by a truck going by, the cause of death will be motor vehicle trauma, and it won't be lack of sidewalks, poor urban planning, failed political leadership, lack of safe crosswalks. And so it got me to think more and more about, stop, and as Thoreau said, people esteem truth remote and don't remember the stuff that's right where they are. We built 2 to 3 million of these in the United States every year. What is the message of this structure? What is the most important thing in this American family's life? What have they wrapped their existence around? Their car. Automobile generated 25% of all the wealth in the United States during the 20th century. This is a picture of the California state flower, and they don't work after about 5 to 6 years. And the affordable housing policy, this is social justice, the affordable housing policy of the United States of America after World War II was, ready? You've all shopped for a house? Drive until you qualify. Because we stopped worrying about people having affordable houses in quality urban areas. We just said, just keep driving and driving and driving, and you'll finally get a place to live. Putting everybody in a car, and you want to move a 175-pound person in a 3,700-pound machine, after a while it is nonsensical, and the idea that we can continue to just pave over. We've now paved over the equivalent area, 60,000 square miles, of the state of Georgia. The equivalent area of Puerto Rico is just surface parking lots in the United States. Think about the climate change impacts of removing that much photosynthesis and vegetation and putting blacktop in. One of the things I teach my students is the built environment, this is really important, the built environment is social policy in concrete. The people in Northwest Atlanta, where Gingrich and Bob Barr were from, didn't want the MARTA, the transit system, coming into Northwest Atlanta. And in fact, they said, oh, MARTA stands for Moving African Americans Rapidly Through Atlanta, and if we put this in, we'll bring in the wrong element. I'm not joking. And so they didn't put it in, and now God's punishing them because at 23 lanes, they still can't get home at night. But these built environment decisions we live with for a very, very long time. And so they've got to be taken, just like the sidebar. And I say this to my students, and everything you're looking at was in somebody's mind, pretty much. Not the sun and the moon, but everything else was in somebody's mind at some point. And if we put stuff in our mind that's really about people's well-being, rather than simply profit or whatever we're trying to do the next time, doesn't. We built America around cars, leading cause of death from ages 3 to 34, cars. If you live in a sprawling area, you're more likely to die than people that don't live in sprawling areas. So I'm running a campaign to make the UCLA campus, I'm one of 4 elements in it, to make the UCLA campus the healthiest campus in America. And even if we don't get there, it's a worthwhile ambition. But one of the things I'm arguing at the provost for is we need to have 20 is plenty on campus. You don't need to go 40 miles an hour on a campus. If you're hit by a car as a pedestrian, a car going 20, you have a 5% chance of dying. If you're hit by a car going 40, you have an 85% chance of dying. Hoboken, a bunch of European cities, British cities, have put the 20 in plenty, but you got to enforce it. We have looked at an obesity epidemic, and the public health people have seen these slides many times, but a lot of times the architects have not, and the design people have not. This is 1991 obesity in the United States. Massachusetts at about, it looks like about 10% back in 1991. By 1997, you're up to 15% or so. By 2010, you're at 24% or so. Oh, that's the last slide I put in this set. But we've added about 25 pounds, the average American's weight, in 25 years. There are chemical reasons, there are nutrition reasons, but there also is the removal of physical activity from Americans' lives. Here's a cause. This is stupid food. But you know what? It tastes good because human beings love sugar, fat, and salt. And it's cheap because we spend $14 billion a year in price supports for corn, soy, and things that aren't commodities. And when you look at the demographic data of who's the fattest people in America and least fit, it's minorities, and they often have the most of these restaurants as well. one of my students, two of my students did this, but I find the fact that we tell people you ought to be healthy, and then they go out the door, and every billboard, I'd like to do an essay of this, every billboard you see tells you to do something that's stupid. I mean, that is really unhealthy. So, I mean, the classic thing is during the Super Bowl, they have these beautiful, fit, handsome people sitting on couches and pretending they're happy because they're drinking sugar water and beer, and cheering for other people that are doing exercise. I mean, what are we doing in this country? So here's the rich neighborhood. They advertise alcohol and entertainment. In the poor neighborhood, they advertise fast food, beer, vodka, and stomach stapling surgery. So it really is a metaphor for what we do to people, particularly less educated, less people with fewer options. As we look at the obesity epidemic that ties to a dramatic epidemic of diabetes in our society, I thought, I never saw a child with type 2 diabetes. We called it adult onset when I was a young doc. It's now half the kids in the diabetes clinic have type 2 adult onset diabetes. Women get it much more readily as their weight goes up than men do. But look, and you can predict what's going to happen. Here's 1994 with diabetes. Here's 2001 with diabetes. And here's 2007 in diabetes. We're now spending 2% of the entire GDP of the United States on one disease, diabetes. It costs people their eyes, their kidneys, and their feet. So where I'm going then, there's a bigger message in this. Anybody, any politician that announces we've got the best medical care system in the world, A, doesn't know what they're talking about, but B, if they think the doctor sitting at the end of the disease pipeline is going to be able to patch up the avalanche of people with obesity-related, diabetes-related, and other chronic diseases because we have not put prevention at the front of the pipeline, they're kidding themselves. I don't have too many more slides, but I'll go through this quickly. This is an article in Journal of the American Medical Association, Internal Medicine, about 2 months ago. Jack talked about this. CDC has this robust data. They sample 5,000 to 10,000 people a year. They do physical exams. They take your blood, your urine. They look at your eyes. They stratify by age, sex, smoking, race, the whole thing. And then they compare people over time. So here's a comparison between people in their late 40s, 50s, early 60s, 20 years ago, and a few years ago. What do you think happened with health? Well, why is it important if people say they're in excellent health? People say they're in excellent health live longer than people that say they're not. That's a big deal to go from a third of the population to 1 in 8 saying, I'm in excellent health. Same age, comparable population. Have some limitations, about a 50% increase. Look at this one. Do you use a cane or a walker or a wheelchair? These people aren't very old. More than a doubling. And you see, you go into Walmart and you see not very old people going around in scooters. And I'm not being critical of the people themselves. I'm critical of the social milieu and physical milieu that's controlling this. Smoking, the good news is smoking's gone down. Obesity, bad news has gone up. Look at this last stat. Do you get regular physical activity? Regular no physical activity to go from 70% to 50%. We've spent the last 20 years in the doctor's office going, you should walk more, you should exercise, you should eat smarter, and everything's gone the wrong way. And where I'm going to say, and I'm going to lead off to a hole at this point, is that sooner or later, wagging our finger at people and telling them to change their behavior when in fact they have no control over their environment is almost a fool's errand. Sooner or later we've got, and when people's environments change, we human beings respond. We will respond if we create environments that really make it easier for people to be physically active and fit. I'm going to stop now because I've probably gone on a little too long, and I'll have some spare slides, but I think it would be important to have my colleague go ahead at this point. Thank you very much.